Greetings to all of you. This week we change the books and we move on to Aeschylus' Agamemnon. And it is the first time we read in this course a tragedy and not a philosophical text. And because of that, I thought the first video will mainly be about the importance of uh, tragedies in understanding philosophy, especially as long as we talk about the philosophy of ancient times, the Greek philosophy. And this first video will mainly be about how we can read tragedies in philosophy or for the sake of philosophy, and especially how we are going to read tragedies in this course. So, of course, tragedies are literary texts, and the most important tragedians in ancient Greece were Sophocles, Aeschylus, the one who wrote Agamemnon, and Euripides, the one who wrote Iphigenia Taulis, which we will read next. Those of you who have taken the introductory course in philosophy with me have read Sophocles' Antigone, so you are a little bit familiar with the text of the tragedians. And now, how can we read a literary text in the context of philosophical discussion? Well, think of this fact that the texts that we are reading are at the beginning even of philosophical writing. At that period of time, when Aeschylus wrote, it was even before Plato, one of the first philosophers. And the tragedians themselves were considered often as being the genuine teachers of virtue, as in fact Martha Nussbaum says. Martha Nussbaum is a philosopher who, I think she's still in Chicago, and I'm not certain, but who wrote several books, some of them in discussing ancient philosophy and tragedy. And in one of them, I think the Fragility of Goodness, she actually claims this, and I think she's correct, that the tragedians were considered the genuine teachers of virtue prior to the philosophers. So, if you wanted to know how to act, and if you lived in Greek society, what you were doing was going to the theater, or, of course, reading Homer and going to listen to the sophists. But one of the activity was to see how the tragedians understood reality and how the tragedians gave lessons in those texts that they were writing, so that you can understand what the right thing to do in life is. There are obviously various ways in which tragedy is read, but especially nowadays, because we make so much of a distinction between philosophical writing and literary writings. But that moment, the moment in which those texts were written, the difference between the two of them was not so obvious. And in fact, Plato, the philosopher who came after the tragedians, has lots of discussions about the importance or the lack of importance of literary writings for understanding philosophy. There is one way in which literary texts are read, and that is the word escapes me now, and I should have written it down. Prophetic literature. But I'm sure you have heard of prophetic word before. It's mainly used in theological context or in religious context. When we have a prophecy, we claim that something will be the case. But the way in which the word prophetic writings will be used by us is mainly the way in which one of my former teachers actually has used it, and that is Professor Sander Goodhart. And he talks about, who teaches at Purdue, who talks about the fact that if you think about tragedies as prophetic writings, we think of the fact that tragedies describe the way in which things will come out to be as long as human beings engage in certain actions. So, if I'm someone who wants to understand how to live my life, I go to those plays, to those tragedies, and I see some events evolving or being developed, and I understand that engaging in certain kind of actions, certain results will come to be for my life as well. Agamemnon is a tragedy that has to do with sacrifice. Agamemnon is a tragedy that has to do with sacrifice in different ways, in fact, and I will mention in this first video only two of them. The first one is how the story started, and it started with Helen. And Helen is the most beautiful woman in ancient Greece, the face that turned 1,000 ships, 10,000 ships, right? Who was the wife of Menelaus, one of the Greek kings, and who was stolen, and probably she was very happy to be stolen by Paris, the Trojan prince. And Agamemnon, the Greek king, who brings together under his command all the Greek armies, who was Menelaus' brother, so he was the brother-in-law of Helen, decides to take an army and go to Troy to get back Helen. Helen has been often considered a scapegoat. She's the one who's guilty. She's the one who's guilty for the death of so many people who died in the Trojan War, on both sides. So that's one possible story of sacrifice, in the way in which we discuss sacrifice so far. But the other story of sacrifice is the sacrifice of Iphigenia, and this sacrifice is a sacrifice of a child done by her own father. And I will talk more about this in the next video.